The world is quite a random place. Even if you hold the deterministic view that all is set in stone from initial conditions, a long chain of cause and effect, can you say what the future will be? We at least must say that this is such a complex process that our understanding of it simulates randomness. And in this, we are creatures who strive for reason. We want things to make sense because we are wired to question. The defining communication of the human race is to ask why, something no other life is readily observed to do. Why does the sun rise? Because it doesn't, the earth rotates. Now, why are we in the right position to witness this? Well, because of a collision long ago that placed us here. And why did that collision occur just so? Each question only raises more further back, and so our gift is also a curse. Knowledge illuminates how much ignorance is left, and there is never certainty but only an accepted level of it. This makes facing ourselves and our actions difficult because we deeply understand there is no solution to life, there is no set path for us to follow. We must understand who we are amongst so much we couldn't observe it even with 100 lifetimes. It is an impossible task, and so we often turn to a solution, to faith. We make things make sense. There is a set end goal, a status, a career, a heaven, something which gives our actions direction, a future which provides meaning to the present. We might not understand it, but it is there and within reach if we believe. Faced with uncertainty, this is a powerful tool to move forward against all odds, but with that power comes the possibility of an overboric tale. A future which saps the meaning from the present rather than providing it, an auto-cannibalistic end to the human condition. For once, I don't have to take time recapping the intricate plot beats of a story, as Angel's Egg, our tale for today, remains simple in what we see. It's also available on the Internet Archive in great quality, which I'll link to in the pinned comment. It's only about just over an hour if you wanted to watch it before this, which I very much recommend. But it's simple in the confusing way, a minimalism which leaves much of the work up to us. Traversing across an empty and ruined world is this young girl who carries around an egg wherever she goes. As far as we know, this is the extent of the world, the extent of horror life, and the extent of all things. There's something so eerie about the idea of one young girl, a sole survivor, in charge of what seems to be the only next source of life. She travels from the ark she lives upon atop the hill, through the forest, into the city which lies after it, and at no point does she come across other life. All that waits for her there is some sort of mysterious darkness rippling across the water and showing her what appears to be a vision of herself drowning. The city isn't much different. The houses are empty, gazing upon her from the windows to the soul. Seen through their windows, despite being deserted, she feels almost observed by the abandonment. The stores are destroyed and empty, save a few goods like the jam she eats alone. Water runs from fountains to rivers, but there is no point to it anymore. The source and the end are the same, entirely meaningless. Empty, abandoned, destroyed, it is a world alone and without comfort. Or so it seems. When the clock strikes a certain hour and the bell rings out, some of these statues of fishermen which linger about the town spur to life, running with their spears in hand in massive droves. They sprint and chuck their weapons at the shadows of fish swimming along the plains of floors and walls, shadows which react to their actions but can never be captured by them. No matter how hard these men try, they are only ever chasing at shadows and will never succeed. They exist solely for this purpose, rising each time the clocks strike, but this purpose itself does not exist. And so they take meaningless actions with no recognition of this fact, acting for no more reason than to act. There is no agency to who they are. The girl remarks about them,
どこにもいないのに追いかけたって魚なんかどこにもいないのに
showing a recognition of this fact. She appears rightfully terrified of them as well, trying her best to be protected from their mad dash and the reckless abandon with which they destroy their own spaces. It makes one wonder how this city became destroyed, from some awful cataclysmic event, or from the frenzied and pointless toil of the men who we see destroy it themselves. There is no definitive answer as to why this world is so, but these hints imply a human-born destruction. In acting for no reason, they lose sight of how they may harm themselves. Despite this danger, the girl still works her way through the town. She still comes here to gather supplies, to maintain herself, and to continue on alone in a ruined world where only shadows keep her company and statues terrify her. As seen by the flasks of water which line her dwellings, something she brings back from the town, it's a routine she's held for a while. I wonder what could lead someone to continue this song and dance for so long, day in and day out with nothing to do but survive. Her entire life is this scavenging journey in this egg. No friends, no entertainment, no comfort at all. Take a moment to think about a world like that, and then about yourself in it. What would lead you to continue on like this? What could motivate you in a world with nothing left? The answer for her, of course, is the egg. Where the only other facsimiles of life we see in this world are chasing shadows, existing mechanically rather than lifelike, she holds an object which is a hope for the future, a fragile and delicate hope for the future. She doesn't simply carry out these actions from habit, but from faith, the idea that her actions now will be rewarded with a specific future even though it can't be perceived at this moment. That whatever the appearance of the world, however dead and pointless it seems, there is some meaning to it that simply can't be perceived. A meaning trapped in a shell. The power of this faith to push her forward against even such powerful forces is seen in a couple of spaces. Of course, the amount of time it's been that was already mentioned. Everything else has turned to meaningless stone, but she continues on because it is that powerful. Faith triumphs over an entirely meaningless world because it is the placement of value itself. It is a grand power of the human mind to conquer even that which we cannot know, as long as we believe that one day we will. But this power is also seen in obscurity. It doesn't appear that she truly knows what is in the egg or have any idea of when it will hatch, but those aspects don't matter to her. What matters is maintaining it and herself to see the day that it does hatch. She smiles and looks around with wonder and awe, even in a world with nothing to be happy about. She runs from danger to keep herself alive, but she also stops to admire the bits of beauty still present in these spaces. She doesn't eat whatever she can find, but she picks what of it she desires. She still lives with the feel of anyone who could live right now. In a world with no life, she has the inner power to live. It feels as if there is a meaning to what she does and a value to her not seen in simple statues. After all, one doesn't run in fear without valuing their potential future. While her actions may not be grand, while her surroundings may have nothing to admire, she finds value in them because of the egg, because of her faith. Believing that there is some greater meaning behind anything makes it so. While the overall world may not make sense, these statues acting just to act, or mysterious shadows, or biomechanical tanks, there is one thing which does. You take care of an egg, and it hatches one day. Everything is dead or dying, and there is nothing left, but it doesn't matter because she has something to do. Faith makes sense of a senseless world by focusing you, keeping going for that goal. It pushes us even through the most dire circumstances with purpose and meaning. But Angel's Egg actually does define one character for certain before the girl. We see a boy who awaits a descending technological ship full of religious-looking statues sprawled all across its surface. He bears a cross at all times, and his hands are bandaged across the palms. There's no mistaking his identity as a Jesus figure in some way, down to his soft and peaceful nature, even if his entrance upon these tank-like objects feels much more aggressive and militant, and his clothing does reveal that of a soldier. However, will he have the same purpose as this figure he is modeled after? At first, his purpose seems to be observation. He appears before the girl, who naturally runs away from this at first terrifying presence, acting on those human traits her faith maintains. She loses him and at a certain point sets down the egg and turns her back to it to interact with a pool of water a short distance away from where she rested. When she returns, the boy is there and the egg is gone. But he offers it to her from his robes, saying,
大切なものは お腹の中に入れておかなければなくしてしまうよ。
She slowly retrieves it from him, and although she at first asks for him not to follow, he does continue observing, and they become much more comfortable together with the passage of time. Along this, he asks her repeatedly what is in the egg. However, she refuses to answer or says that's something she can't share with him. He sees her dedication to this purpose and respects it. He could have stolen the egg or broken it right then, but he didn't. He didn't take that chance to ease his curiosity, but to protect it and return it to her. In this, he makes clear that he has no objection to this act of faith on its own merit, and I believe the very idea of observation first shows a respect for it, to truly understand her faith. He respects it and its power to give her value in a depressing world. What he is doing, he's doing in some way for her, shown as well in his kindness to shield her from the rain and other gentle actions. Along this time together, they return to the Ark. After these couple times asking about the egg's contents, he finally remarks,
その卵の中に何がいるのかまだ教えてもらえないのかな。
He looks to the flasks of water lining every available wall of the Ark she resides in, and asks if each one is for a day she spent here, and although she denies this, his response is to say that he too forgot where exactly he came from. It does lead one to wonder why he would say this in response. The idea may be that so much time has passed, one cannot remember the origins of the being, applying to her as well. They know what they do, but may have lost sight of why it was being done. As such, the flasks may have at one point represented days or hours or anything, and she simply forgot. Maybe the egg was supposed to take a certain time that these represented, but as they grew and grew, the action became a simple fact of life and its reason was forgotten. This is another effect of how we as humans provide meaning. Since it is our creation, it is also ours to toss away or forget. If the reasons leave our mind, then it is meaningless. It becomes mundane and nothing more than the average act of an average day. But whatever the case of these flasks, having witnessed her journey, it is impossible for them to represent a short amount of time. Each one seems like most of a day of travel, so she has been on this quest for some time. And the question the boy asks her is after they have been together for a decent bit of time, so I believe that was him beginning to not observe, but to question her. He saw someone dedicated to a task which provided them with a sense of self and value above the other human-shaped machines in this world, and he respected that it gave her human value. But how true is that value and that purpose when the faith which provided it is placed in and on something which may never come, or one purpose which is actively negative? At what point is one simply justifying stasis? Within her dwellings, there is this carving of a tree on one wall. It reminds the boy of something in his past where he speaks of a black horizon from which a tree came forth, sucking the life from the ground and reaching up as if to grab something. That something being the giant bird sleeping within an egg, one of the opening shots of the movie. When the girl hears this, she asks where it is now, and he replies,
今でもそこにいて夢を見続けているよ。
This clearly presents it as something negative. The tree which supported it sapping the life from the ground, this means that the egg, one which, if it is still there now, never hatched, was doing nothing more than taking the life which could be used elsewhere, in a space which clearly needs it more than a little. Something kept having a reason to give, but only in the service of something that took endlessly. The purpose became an eternal offering of the value of life to something else. An egg which never hatches is not a new source of life, but it is a parasite, a drain on its host until there is nothing left and no benefit. His story is a horror story, one devoid of hope where an object of the future drains the present. After this tale, the girl remarks continuously that it's here, and takes him to a different place within this ark, where there is a massive fossil of a harpy-like figure on the wall, a human skeleton with the wings of a bird. Upon observing this, she says,
あれはもう石になってるけど、この中にいるの。私が畳めて返すの。
I think this occurring after his stories is exceptionally telling of her character. We've said that the egg is what allows her to be human in an inhuman world, but who is it making her really? He told her a story of an egg which function more like a parasite. And after this, she suddenly has an idea of what's in the egg and what she can show him to justify her maintenance of it. And it's one of the birds that he said killed this land. Her reaction to hearing a story about how her purpose very well may have been a terrible fate for this world is to say that, yes, it is, and then be happy about it. It's because it was a straw to clutch on, to say, the thing I believe in is true, I swear. When she earlier said she can't tell him what is inside of the egg, it's because she didn't know. Even if she did know once, it's been so long she must have forgotten. But since he gives her an idea, she's oh so willing to show him exactly that. Even if this is the idea she's had the entire time, it's insane to support such a thing. It's an ancient story lost to time, a fossil of a dead past she's trying to revive, using time and energy on something impossible which could have no benefit, even when there's a whole world sitting in disrepair which could use that time and energy. Sure, the fishermen actively destroy it, but she only sits by and watches. Is her faith in this unknown future just keeping her from making a better one with her own hands? After her statement about the fossil, the boy's reaction is this.
知っていたよ。きっとそうだと思っていたよ。
He looks shocked at this discovery, and yet he speaks to knowing it was the truth. This is due to conflict. He witnessed what could be value to her life, but he sees now that that value was nothing of her own, nothing of real value to her. This goes even deeper, of course, as later when they sit together, he asks if she can hear something. She listens for a moment, holds the egg closer, and says she can hear it breathing. He says that's her breath. She says she can hear the sound of wings, of the egg dreaming of flying in the sky. He says that's the wind outside. It's another odd coincidence that she never observes this before, but suddenly believes it's dreaming after he specifically said the egg he saw had a bird which was still there and still dreaming. It appears that what she's doing is using anything which fits as evidence for her faith. She doesn't question statements which oppose it, but rather ignores their negativity and takes them as validity. She's become so reliant on it that anything will do if it can even appear to support a future to the egg at all, even if it isn't a good future. All she's doing is avoiding complexity. She wants a simple answer and nothing more. This faith is doing what we praised it for earlier. The breath of oneself, the wind outside where you live, these are things which don't hold value on their own as far as we're normally concerned. They are those mundane, average things of average days. They're just unimportant details that fade away into the background. But with this faith she holds, they're able to become meaningful signs of the future she hopes for. Something so simple becomes something so grand, a motivation to push forward found in the least likely places. She continues because this provides a reason to. The human brain created value from nothing as it always can, but it's gone too far. She finds a blind happiness in these aspects by attributing the power of her own mind to something else. I think at a certain point it really begins to detract the value from herself to think this way. The act of breathing is something which should be meaningful for us. It is the very act of living itself. It is us being us. But she has reached a point where that fundamental aspect of her own being is only recognizable as an act of faith, as an attribution to the egg which she carries and sustains herself for. Her breath is not her own, it is in service of her faith, and so she is not living for herself, but for her faith. A human is complex and hard to understand. It requires questioning and deep contemplation, but an egg is simple. And so it is easier to say all is of the egg than of the human holding it. While she may appear to be much more than anything else in this world, why is that? Is it actually a value for her, or is she simply a vessel of the egg, a host for the parasite, a form for the faith? She continues, but is she really any more than a statue herself? There is an agency to one's actions if those actions are directed by faith alone. What she does not of her own will, but of the will directed by a future which will never come. She is moving with more purpose than the fisherman, but for no reason which leads anywhere still. It's just avoiding the same truth as them. The boy's active observation does eventually end. Once he did return the egg to her, but upon witnessing how much of her it had become, he made a harsh decision. He waits until she falls asleep and turns away from it. He retrieves it from the bed, places it on the ground, lifts his cross, and uses that symbol of faith itself to destroy the egg before disappearing into the night. When the girl wakes the next morning, she looks around to find him gone, and as she walks, her foot hits something on the ground. Of course, the broken shell of her egg. She lets out a cry of complete despair and then runs out of the ark, which is now overgrown with one of these trees the boy described. But as she runs after him, she falls into a ravine now flooded with water, facing a certain death. Coming closer to the water, she witnesses her own reflection, but a form of herself that's clearly older. When she makes contact with it, she becomes this form, lets out a last gasp of breath which reaches the surface as multiple smaller eggs, and presumably drowns. It's a literal coming face to face with the truth of her situation. The egg was of course her faith, the thing which spurred her on even in this world. It gave her a reason to sprint forward after all, but it is also what made the sprint forward into one of her death, which let her body move but kept her heart stationary, kept her from recognizing her own change or growth because faith became all of who she was. Her actions were not her own, they were the egg's because the egg was simple and the egg made sense. While that can make one happy, it also makes them nothing more than a vessel who will never recognize their own growth. Even though she is an adult, she lives as a child, a person who is one mostly without an agency of their own. They live according to the direction of others around them, their parents or teachers or elders. They are beholden to a greater strength. She wasn't a child, but she was a child. She lived under the strength of the egg. She had no agency of her own, because it was her first concern upon waking up. It was with her every moment she traveled, and was right by her side as she fell asleep to do it again. What provided her meaning, that meaning became a constant and overbearing weight, a concern that she had to carry. She couldn't go anywhere or do anything without first thinking of how it would impact her faith. She took everything as evidence of that belief because it was what defined her in full, and there was a ton of evidence against it to counter. She denies that each flask represents a day, but it's undeniable that they show an extraordinary amount of effort. And what does she have to show for it? What results are there to all that effort? Coming to terms with reality means seeing how much of her life was outright wasted. It is a pain beyond comprehension because it is a pain of living without having ever lived. And believing too hard, making it too much of a deal, is what placed that horror upon her. Nothing has come of her actions, and so each passing day her faith can come more and more into question, and so there is a need for more and more to support it. When someone comes along with a new story or idea that even remotely fits, it's adapted to be in support of this cause which consumed her being, even when it's against it, because it needs all that propping up. It's ironic that she can understand the pointlessness of the fisherman, but is unable to see that her existence is mostly the same, only with a more appealing coat. They of course showed the importance of holding some faith, as without it we would be overcome by a nothingness, be akin to statues who come to life simply to achieve a purpose which they were created around. Having something to provide those actions meaning allows us to be more, to be like real people. However, we see that we cannot attribute that meaning to something outside of ourselves. If it is something from outside of us, it also has the ability to alter its surroundings for stagnation rather than altering us against it for the better. An outside faith can make the world appear entirely different from what it truly is to maintain itself. We see that once the egg is broken, this world around the girl changes. She is shown to be residing within an ark that is actually one of those trees sapping the life from the land. The skyline looks even more bleak and desolate, the world covered in these eggs. It seems there never was any hope. The rivers overflow and drown most of this world, bursting forth just as her forced realization does. The town she walked so often, the forest to get there, all the waters rides towards her dead stone ark. Were the fish only shadows because she couldn't see how high the waters had already risen? Because the world she knew was one locked in the past? How long had she truly been drowned under her own beliefs for? While she held this egg with such delicate care, one which kills the world was raised above her head. She was feeding the parasite, not witnessing the reality of it because she did not want reality. She wanted a story which provided value against all odds, which put purpose to suffering, which created a reason to continue on. In a world like hers, of course this is needed, but it can be a self-defeating force. The very act of being human is being at odds with an absurd world which makes no sense and seems to desire our end. It is to be a creature which grew beyond its intended bounds and now suffers in knowledge. And with all of that, we continue anyway, cursed from the moment we're born. There is nothing which tamps out the human spirit, the process of asking why, unless we ourselves go against this, unless we decide to stop asking why and begin accepting why. To begin seeing the world not for mundane horror as it is, but instead to see it as what we wish for, which is comfort and ease. We have to strike a balance between these two states, find the faith which lets us push on, but which never overtakes our being and supplements a parasite. And so, we must remember the boy's words when he returns the egg. The important things must be kept inside of you. Something from the outside is a weight that slows us down, a task we carry around which can be lost or stolen or proven false, which can be broken, leaving us destroyed as well if it is all of us. But one from inside, insulated under many layers of the human body and psyche alike, is one which weathers the storm and maintains itself for itself. Rather than allowing an outside force through those barriers to create an abusable weakness, even if it can obviously do good, we can find that path inside of ourselves already. If we must have faith, and we must grow from it, then what else is there than oneself? We are all stronger than the shell of some fragile egg. Allowing oneself to live protecting such a weak thing is only a disservice to the value that they can hold. After all, we are the ones creating these world-changing ideas from our own minds. Why should we place that value which is inherent to us in other things? We're the ones who think so much we understand a harsh world with no value, and we're the ones capable of creating a defense against that in our faith in concepts so strong and far-reaching they irrevocably change the course of our entire race. The minds of a few people seeking value led to charity, to wars, to community, and to deep division all alike. What we think can change the world, so of course it can change us. A faith inside is the best option, the one which doesn't force outside factors to change to maintain itself, but which creates personal change to grow itself. Faith is our creation, and yet it is so powerful it can overtake the value of an entire person. It can benefit or entirely distort them alike, bring them together with others, or slaughter them all in its name. We alone conquer ourselves. That is the power we have. So of course, you alone, with only faith in yourself, can push forward in whatever world surrounds you, and can do so while seeing it true. You are lesser than nothing in the clouds or under the crust. Never devalue yourself by giving up that power to something which won't even reveal itself to you. And now I'm the one to crack open my own skull like an egg, let the brain drip onto the hot surface of a world baking under its expanding star and cook itself into a veritable mess. For every lofty word which I write of continuing on and pushing forward, I know so often the drive is to be held back. I write these words because the task is so brutal, because I must continually reaffirm myself that the path of awareness and reality is greater than the false happiness of ignorance. For every word which I write so high, there is a fear so low, one which I always worry will finally consume me, that I will be face to face with the monster which created me, called by this world's name, and under its gaze I will buckle, I will be unable to perceive such horror, and instead pet the beast as if it were a friendly dog. The path of ignorance is so appealing, to never practice the necessary human trait of questioning all around us, and as such to never be aware that more is possible, to never be aware that we are so valuable, the state of our existence is inherently wrong. We are creatures so deep into our own minds that we can become trapped in them, that we can create concepts of men on clouds and then war over them for centuries and never cease. Deep divisions we feel now are due to the practices of men hundreds of years prior who sought their own escape from the horror of awareness and wanted the comfort of faith. Our minds are such powerful tools that we cannot escape even that what those long dead concocted in their minds. Each human is a walking bomb, a veritable warhead of thoughts and emotions, history and feelings, conceptions and hatred and love, and everything alike which is incomprehensible outside of our own scope, expressed only in the meaningless symbols which we write and speak in an attempt to become more than one. To exist, to be, to human, is to be overwhelmed when we see it in full, not even the extent of our species, but the extent of one mind, which is as limitless as the universe which bore it, expanding forever in all directions. One cannot even know themselves in full, let alone the world around them, and despite this fact, we all continue on every single day as if we know anything. How can this be anything but horror? Can there be beauty in horror? Is a brain fried like an egg on this hot surface a work of beautiful horror? Are my insides presented as outsides to the outside a work of positive dread? I can never differentiate myself from the girl holding the egg because of course I have one myself. I do not know what it is inside of it. I question nearly every day what truly resides within inside of my faith. And yet, despite that, I sit here and explain that faith time and time again, spilling more and more of my insides to understand what they are, cracking open my own egg to find what's inside. Is that value? Is that enough of my own creation that it won't destroy me? Or does my reliance on a platform, on a viewership, on you set the stage for a wonderful disaster? In this incomprehensibility known as a human being, I have no idea and never will. And with that knowledge, I continue on. One day I will be defined as a solid being in my final breath, in the end of my possibilities, and these are the possibilities that I chose to define myself by. I think when that day comes, I will be happy with the solidity of my being which remains. And so, until that day, I will continue through this cycle of selves, the next one arriving and consuming the prior, subsisting itself on the meal from its head which is cooked on the hot surface.